I'm going to show you an absolutely incredible game played by the man of the moment. It's Chidambaram Aravindh from India, only 25 years old, but he is in big form. He is playing with the white pieces against the Chinese top player Wei Yi. And in this video, I'm going to show you what happened in that incredible game with a lot of interesting tactical ideas. So let me guide you through the ins and outs. If you do like my videos, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, of course. And here we go. It is 1d4 by Aravindh. Knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, d5, knight c3. Standard developing play by both sides. Bishop comes out to b4. It's the so-called Ragozin variation. A lot of opening theory is known here, and also to both players, because we are following a very trendy line with the move queen b3, attacking the bishop. Pawn goes to c5, trying to challenge the center, supporting the bishop. White's capturing the pawn, renewing the threat against that bishop, but black continues his development with the move knight c6, protecting the bishop. White's bishop comes out to g5 to pin that knight on f6, and black ignores it by bringing out his queen to a5, increasing the pressure on that knight on c3. The threat now is to play the move knight e4, but therefore bishop takes f6 played. And of course, the idea is to double the pawns, but first black captures the pawn on c4 to attack the queen. Queen recaptures, pawn takes f6, and after rook to c1 to support the knight on the c file, there is queen takes c5. Black has managed to win his pawn back, and this, as I said, it's a well-known theory, has been played, has been seen in a lot of grandmaster games. And of course, if queens are coming off the board here, then black is doing absolutely fine. No problems whatsoever, but white is trying to prove the vulnerability of that pawn on f6. With the move, queen f4, attacking that pawn, and the king goes to e7, defending the pawn. The king stays in the center, but it's ambitious play. The king is relatively safe there, at least if white is not able to attack it very soon. And as you can see, white also has some development issues here. Therefore, the move g3 was played, and black tries to play it actively here with the move e5, so that the bishop can be developed very soon. Black is attacking the queen. Queen goes to e4. Now, obviously, knight d5 can be a threat at some point. Not now, because it's still pinned. And, well, black decides here to trade off the bishop for the knight. Was not the only move, but it's quite a decent move here. Now, a remarkable moment, as a lot of people would probably expect here, something like rook takes c3 to attack the queen. But after queen b6, counterattacking the pawn on b2, things are not looking bad for black at all. If he get out his bishop to e6, connect the rooks, white still needs some time to complete development on the king side. So therefore, white voluntarily ruins his own pawn structure with the move pawn takes c3. Bishop comes out to e6, and here it is bishop to g2. What is black going to do? Well, we have to find out. You cannot really move the rook away from h8, as it will hang the pawn on h7. You may consider bringing the queen's rook to the center, to the c or to the d file, but they're followed here king f8. Also interesting idea, trying to bring the king over to g7. And white played queen h4 to attack the pawn again. The king goes to g7, and here it is the move knight to d2. As you see, the king, it does look safer on the king side. Black, for instance, cannot activate his rook. That will run into spectacular queen sacrifice, as it will help white to regain the queen, and white will be a pawn up after that. So black has to anticipate here the threat of knight to e4, attacking both the queen and the pawn on f6. So queen goes back to e7. Bishop takes c6. Interesting moment. Why does white play that move? To weaken the structure. Black, of course, has to take back. But now there follows this plan with the move g4. And you can see that white maybe doesn't have intentions to castle here, but rather get a rook to the g file, try to get in the move g5, try to open up that file for a rook, or otherwise, now you see in the game that Wei Yi played here the move rook h8 to g8, Now, those threats are probably less impressive as the king can hide in the corner. But white plays the move knight to e4. Excellent idea, preventing the king from getting to a safer square, as the pawn on f6 got to be protected by both the king and the queen. Bishop to d5, taking the knight. If the knight goes away, the rook is hanging. But knight goes anyway to g3, as the rook cannot be taken because of the knight fork on f5, winning the queen. So instead, the king goes back to h8. And now the rook is still hanging. So white decides here to castle. And it's interesting. Like, it may look as the white king is quite vulnerable here with the rook on the g file and missing that light squared bishop on g2. But of course, there are ideas later on to get a knight into the attack to this wonderful outpost on f5. But first things first, black is capturing a pawn on a2. White plays c4 so that the bishop cannot go back. It's not under threat, but black has to be careful. Queen e6 played, attacking the pawn on g4, also attacking the pawn on c4. Knight f5, knight f5 is never really an option, not at this point. Will be met by queen takes f5 as the g-pawn is pinned. So after queen e6, white played h3 to solidify its king side. And now, interesting line, you cannot take the pawn on c4. Was not played, but it's a terrible mistake because of rook takes c4. And after taking that rook, runs into queen takes f6, rook g7, knight h5, threatening mate. If you defend with the other rook, you can take on g7, and then later the other rook will come in. And this is leading to checkmate in a few moves. So you see, bishop takes c4 is not possible. Black played here the move rook to g6 to support the pawn on f6. But white continues here with rook fd1. Very active play, and black has to be careful. You're up a pawn, but that pawn is not going to run very, very fast. So what should black do? Well, Wei Yi decided here to play ambitiously with the move f5. According to the machines, it's not a good idea because white, and that was not played in the game, there is this interesting idea to give a check on d8. And the point is that if the rooks are coming off the board and you block here with rook g8, there is queen a5. And the bishop is in trouble. If it goes to b3, there's queen c3, and it's like almost trapped. White is probably winning. If you do take on c4, then we have the same rook sacrifice once again, as it will be met by queen takes e5 check, rook g7, and well, there are various ways to convert, but the nicest way to convert is to play queen b8, rook g8, queen b2 check. It's not a repetition of moves, but you take on f5 here with deadly threats against the rook on g7. There's no longer queen c1 here. That's why the queen is on b2. Long variation, not easy to see, and it was also not played. White instead played here this move f3, once again to protect the pawn on g4. And well, black may have considered now just to take. If you do take back, follow up with the move f5. There is this pin on the g file, so you cannot win material by taking on f5. It's a razor sharp position. Anything can happen. But instead, Wei Yi didn't take. He brought his rook into the attack with rook a to g8. But white played now the move rook d8. Pawn takes pawn. White recaptures. And still, it's an incredibly sharp position. But black looks like it's having everything under control. There followed bishop takes c4. Rook takes g8. Rook takes g8. And now white really wants to get the knight into the attack. Played here the move king f2. And now you understand that you're 2 pawns down as white, but you got to try something. You need to look for ideas based on, for instance, knight f5, rook h1. King is safe here, and these pawns, they are not running fast at all. What can black do? Well, you got to cover your king side carefully here. If you play a move like bishop d5 with the idea to meet rook h1 with queen g6, probably things are okay for black. But instead, they followed bishop b5. You're protecting the pawn, but the bishop, it does feel like it's not helping at the other side of the board. And, well, white may have quite a number of interesting options here. Again, a move like rook h1, threatening checkmate. That seems to me like the most appealing move. But there followed knight e4, which is also quite interesting. As you have a plan, for instance, if black starts to run here with his pawn, you can play the move knight f6, threatening mate. And if you protect with the rook, it's rook h1. And if you run even further, there's this beautiful queen sacrifice, which is leading to mate with rook and knight. So that is the idea behind this move knight e4. You want to get your knight to f6. Black played here the move king g7 to cover that f6 square. But then what to do? There follows rook h1, threatening this check on h7 again. And well, black played here the move queen g6 to guard the king. But here the queen comes into e7, threatening to take the pawn on e5. Queen goes back to e6. And of course, black doesn't mind potential double pawns after the exchange of queens. Black needs to survive a kingside attack. White is playing here for a crushing attack here with queen g5. And what are you going to do? You cannot block with the queen. It's queen takes e5. If you go back into the corner with your king, you're attacking the queen, but it will be met by knight f6. Beautiful queen sacrifice again, because it's the same mating motive with knight and rook. Only move here instead is king f8. And now the queen, of course, is under an attack. The queen goes back to d2. And white is intending probably to take on h7. But there followed here rook to g6. And, well, if you do take on h7, the queen maybe goes to d5. You'll try to offer the exchange of queens. So white decides here to come in with the queen first to d8. Two options, block with the queen or go away with the king. Well, if you move the king, there is a simple move like knight g5, attacking the queen, as well as checkmate on h7. Therefore, black has to block with the queen. And now there are interesting ideas. You can move your queen to c7, for instance, with ideas to take on h7, maybe to go knight e6. The position looks pretty bad. And if you try to continue offering the exchange of queens, then black will eventually probably lose the pawn on a7, because instead, if you play king to g7, then there's also this very nasty knight move, knight g3, which is going to lead to material gain for white. Anyway, was not played. In the game, there followed the move queen h4. Like the queen is now taking over the task of the rook to hit the pawn on h7. But there is this move h6 when black still has everything under control. But the game continues with the move rook d1. As there is this threat of winning the queen thanks to this skewer on the back rank. And what can you do here? It's an incredibly difficult line. And here Wei Yi made the decisive mistake. He played the move queen e6. It is not a good move, but you may have considered here this move king g7, but it's an incredibly difficult line. And the point is that if we follow a natural sequence of moves, like after rook d8, queen e6, rook d6, attacking the queen again, queen goes to c4, counter-attacking e2. After rook takes g6, you can take with the king. And if you give a check here, it's king g7, you can go queen takes e5, and after king g6, there's no way to make progress here. Apparently, thanks to this queen on c4, you're guarding your king side sufficiently. Queen f6, king h7, and there's no way to break through. Queen can come back to e6, and black is fine. But let's compare with what happened in the game. As there followed the move queen e6 immediately. Now it is queen d8 check, king to g7, and now it is rook to d6. You're attacking the queen. The queen comes to c4. But now it is rook takes g6. And thanks to the queen on d8, black cannot recapture with the king, as it does allow queen g8 with checkmate. Therefore, only move is to take with the pawn. But there is queen f6 check. Now, king has only two squares. If you go back to g8, it's queen takes g6. You take first pawn with check, and after king goes somewhere, you take a second pawn. Material's even, but it's a devastating attack with queen and knight. White is completely winning there. So, instead, the king went to h7. But now it is queen e7 check. The king goes back to h8. And now, this is a fantastic position. Just pause the video for a second, hit the subscribe button, give this video a like, tell to all your friends that you have seen this incredible game. And then you will realize that there's an absolute killer blow. And it's not queen f8 check, because there's still queen g8. And, well, the queen helps out in defense. If you play knight f6 with the idea to deliver checkmate with queen and knight, then you have forgotten about queen takes e2. And black is in time here to give a bunch of checks, and you cannot escape a perpetual. But you understand that you have to anticipate black's potential counterattack, and therefore the final move of the game is so elegant. It's a really beautiful move. It's king to g3, and this is game over because the king is totally safe. Black cannot do anything. If you take that pawn on e2, there is queen f8 check, king h7, knight f6 checkmate, queen and knight working fantastically together. The alternative is, for instance, to come back with your queen instead. Like, the queen can help out in defense, but it's not really going to work. There's knight f6, you're attacking the queen, queen g7, and now it's queen to e8, as this is also leading to checkmate. So you see this position after king to g3. Well, the king is safe, there's no counterplay, and there is this idea to go knight f6, queen h7, or some other form of mating net of queen and knight. So I thought this was a very exciting, very impressive game by Aravindh, who is now climbing up the world ranking ladder. If I'm not mistaken, he's currently world number 15, 25 years old, rating of 2740, something like that. He's making a lot of progress in the shadow of his fellow countrymen, Gukesh, Ragnananda, Erigaisi. But this guy, he can play real chess. Fascinating to see. I'm a big fan of his games. Very creative, original concepts, and fantastic attacking play as well. So I hope you enjoyed this game as well. And I will keep you posted on more exciting games from the Prag Masters. See you soon.